to PEMA TV.
Welcome to Friday, April 18th, 2014, 2 days before Easter.
Happy Good Friday to all of our Judeo-Christian followers, viewers, friends.
And if I forget at the end, happy Easter to all the Christians, happy Passover to all the Jews, and happy planting to everybody else, because everybody's going to be planting something soon.
And
I hope so.
I think it's the blessed ravioli for the Pastafarians and the flying spaghetti monster.
It could be.
I think so. I'm not quite sure. I might have just made that up. But as you saw earlier as we started the broadcast, PEN is powered by Metaluna Boutique and Stones, and you can always find your stone needs there.
Yes.
That is raw smoky quartz.
That is. And in 6 weeks, you can also get a kitten.
Yes, please in 6 weeks.
I have 4 little girls.
All have an M on their forehead. Not quite sure what that means. I don't know if that's a sign of the apocalypse or not.
It's Metaluna. Hello.
I tried to convince Kim to name them red, blue, green, and what else? Yellow?
Yeah.
Yellow.
Yeah, because all had M&Ms. But anyway. But tonight we have a very special guest, and he's going to help us explain something that is, or let's not even say the word explain. Let's say demystify some questions that we've had about astrology. Tonight we're joined by Issac Bradfield, who is also a co-host on Interstate Highways, which was actually on last night, so it's like we haven't talked in years, Issac.
It seems just like yesterday.
Just almost. So how have you been, sir?
Good. It was a good Friday. They let us out early, so that was always fun.
Yeah. What started you, just to give our viewers a little bit of background, what started you down the astrological path, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah, even when I was very, very young, I was always extremely sensitive to everything that was going on around me. And even though my parents were not practitioners of any mystical type art or anything like that, they did use pendulums, and they were very conscious of nature. And as I was growing up, I could feel things that were going on. I was picking up on people's thoughts and ideas and working with that. And then as I got a little bit older, I started studying both astrology and tarot at the same time, and basically taught myself from when I was in high school. And it's been that way ever since. I've always been interested in all the different kinds of divinational arts, especially dealing with astrology.
And I know you and Jordan were talking last night, how people can use their chart to help guide them and help increase their gifts when they are present. Do you think this was something you were predispositioned to do, or are you just really lucky to be born where you were and you kind of fell into place?
I think you can look at a chart, and some people are predisposed to being psychic to some degree. Whether they really take it up or not and really become part of that ends up being a real individual thing. To me, it was just fascinating, and it still is. Everybody's chart is so individual, and it is packed with so much information, and it's just fascinating to take a look at them and see how they work. And everybody has the chance to work with them in different ways. You can try to fight the force, but usually it tries to push you on back to where you're supposed to be.
Right, and just so people can get some kind of grounding and foundation with this, astrology dates back, 3,500, 4,000 years?
At least. Man has been looking at the stars since he could look up and see them. And he's always been trying to figure out what was going on in terms of nature that he could work with to benefit his own survival. So when the Pleiades were going through, you knew that was a good time to plant. And as man left his role as a hunter-gatherer and became agriculturally oriented, that became extremely important, that you planted at the right time and you harvested at the right time. So there was a natural both affinity for looking at the stars and a natural reaction to it. You either survived or you didn't by being successful with your farming. But also with that, now we saw, the ancients looked up there and they saw these planets. They saw these stars, which they didn't realize were planets at the time, actually moving through a particular portion of the sky. And as they moved across, they were trying to make correlations between those movements and where they were in the sky and what was happening to them. And with that, that's what started astrology, and the Magi and the Babylonians and the Egyptians. This is as well as the Chinese. Everybody has used it in different forms, but it's basically still the same idea of where the planets are in the sky in relation to what's going on to us.
Do you think we've lost with... I know you have to go way out in the country, at least in the United States, because, PEN, we are an international broadcasting outfit. But do you think... I know you have to go way out in the quote-unquote sticks to see the stars the way you used to be able to see them. Do you think our modern living has disconnected us from that cycle to a certain degree?
Unfortunately, yes. And that's why, when people actually do get a chance to get out into the country and see the stars, they're just awed by them. And people that go camping up in wilderness areas or getting away from the cities, and they actually get a chance to see them, it's a revolutionary idea and event to look up there and see what's going on. It's fascinating. And people in the cities lose touch with nature by living in the city, and that's why it's so important, if you are there, that you deal with nature the best you can in terms of a garden, going to the park, planting something, going to a lake or river or whatever, and being part of that so you reconnect to Earth.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. And what I always tell my clients as well, Eric, it always makes them feel better. Yeah, you get an immediate response. You just feel calmer, and it releases a lot of that anxiety that the electrical, technological age that we live in, especially in the cities, gives us, and it releases that, and you can start to feel more alive and a little bit more connected to everything.
Yeah, I would concur with that.
Yeah. So that's what's going on with that. I think it's it definitely gives us an insight that we normally don't see just in our normal everyday life. And I think it's very, very beneficial for people to be aware of their charts and what's going on with them.
And people also need to understand that, like we said, astrology has been around for, let's say, 4,000 years, just to round it off nice and even. Documented for 4,000 years. But like tarot's only been around for 250, 300?
Correct.
And of course I'm sure the same time that we looked up, we looked down too. So when you start talking about reading tea leaves and runes and various bones, and those types of divination have also been around for quite a long time also.
Right.
But the reason I bring up the timeline with tarot is I don't think people quite understand exactly how much longer astrology and numerology have been around.
It's infinite distance apart, really. It's a good point that you bring up. Tarot is relatively recent, and there's a lot of attributations of astrology and other forms to tarot, but it's a recent formulation of using symbology. Compared to astrology, it's just happened.
Right. It's almost like MTV2. you know what I mean? It came along. It does have some benefit.
More commercials.
But almost that's actually a perfect way to describe it. Is it is more commercial.
Yeah.
It is a watered down version of don't tarot people don't come attacking me with the Frankenstein mob, but it is a watered down version of an astrological chart to a certain degree.
I would agree with that, because you're actually giving pictures. You're giving some symbolic form to those astrological powers, yep, or energies, or whatever's going on there. So it's a little bit easier to read for most people.
And it's not as time consuming. That's probably the other reason it was invented, is it's not nearly as time consuming, because like specifically tonight, we're going to be talking about my lovely wife Kim's chart, and that chart took you quite a while to come up with, and maybe not so long to generate, but it takes a while to interpret, I'm sure.
It takes a little bit more time, definitely. And luckily, computers came around and really solved a lot of astrologers' time constraints. I remember back in the old days actually having to sit down and actually calculate everything out, which is kind of funny now thinking about it. But now I can put that in and I can have a chart real quick. But like we'll look at here shortly at a chart, it's nothing but symbols. And if you don't know how to read those symbols, nothing happens. And to really read a chart, you have to sit down and study it for a while to get a true understanding of it. And Eric, something that goes on with a lot of charts, you can go online now and you can order a computer-generated chart as well as an interpretation for not that much money. But what you don't get with that is the correlation of the planets working together or working against each other in tandem or in groups of threes or whatever. Astrology programs can't do that at this point in time. They don't have enough intelligence behind them. So you lose a lot of what the chart can actually give somebody by going that route. So if you go to a professional astrologer, they can give you a whole lot more of what's really happening there in the total picture of the individual, not just portions of it.
Right.
Well, and a computer-generated model can't dumb it down either.
Well, that's true. A computer-generated model would only regurgitate however it was programmed to, whatever information was put into it and how it was. There's no intuitiveness to it. There's no learning. There would be no learning from it. It would just be I think that's why I don't even know if there are apps for. I'm sure there's an app for the iPhone that will give you a tarot reading. I'm sure there is.
Sure, there is.
And I'm sure all it does is regurgitate what's in the little white book at the front of the the Rider-Waite deck. I'm sure that's all it does is regurgitate that information.
But if you don't understand the information reading it, you're not going to understand it.
Right.
So having a real person behind it to dumb it down for you sometimes helps.
Well, that's why we invited Issac on tonight, so everybody will learn. All of our millions of listeners will now walk away with much more information than they had.
Well, it's much like David Roundtree. He can
Sure.
sit there and talk about whatever, but when it comes to me, he knows to dumb it down because I'm a tectile. And I'm the first one to say I'm a tectile.
Well,
Because that's how I am.
And I'm not arguing with you at all. But let's just kind of dive into this. Issac, where did you want to start with this?
well, let's take a quick glance at Kim's chart just so everybody gets an idea. What does the astrology chart look like?
It's up there.
Can you put
It
Can you
looks
put
like
that
a
up real quick?
carnival ride.
It's up there.
Okay, excellent. Over on the right-hand side, we have a big circle. And what we have there is basically a map of the universe and the planets when Kim was born. Where is Kim on this map? She is in the very, very center of that circle. And the planets are around her. And, it's space. So we have planets beneath us, above us, to the side, left and right. And over on the left-hand side, we have a grid which has the planetary symbols listed there. And so if we look at the very top, we see, the moon symbol, and right next to it going down, we see the sun, then Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, North Node, Ascendant, and Midheaven. Those are the typical ones that are working with. And those little symbols that are in between those, that's a grid of saying how this planet relates to this other planet in terms of its angular difference. Angular difference, what are we talking about there? We're looking at the planet in the sky in relation to where we're at and their angular coordinates.
Right.
And each one of those coordinates, if they're within a particular range, they have a particular meaning and a particular symbol. So it looks a bit like it's a lot of Greek there, but what it is a shorthand form of giving a lot of information about what's going on in that chart to the right that you can look at and very quickly pick out things that are going on.
Trait or trends.
Right. Or, influences that are happening right there. Now, if you get a chart, do you need to understand all that? Not really, but you need to understand what it means. So hopefully somebody's interpreting that for you, or you get a chance to study it on your own and learn as you go, which is considered one of the best ways to learn astrology, is pick up your chart and start going through it step by step and trying to ascertain what it really means, and then you can apply it to yourself and say yes or no.
Gotcha. I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm here.
Let's go on to the next slide. And it's just a plain chart.
It's an empty wheel.
It's an empty wheel. That's exactly what it is. And this is what you're starting with. You're starting with the galaxy is around the individual. We have 12 houses is what they're called. And those are those sections of that wheel. They're 30 degrees each. So if you have 12 of them, you have 360 degrees. So you have a full circle. What does it represent? It represents a section of the sky. Not the whole sky, just a section of the sky where the planets move. So we're looking at that section, which back in that particular time had a particular constellation there. So that is what is considered the sign for that particular area of the sky.
Okay.
It's a clock with no hand.
Pretty much.
And as we go through those, they have assigned positions. So let's go on to the next slide.
Okay.
And what we have here, I talked about the symbols for the different planets. It's a great shorthand, and this is a lot of what the ancients used as well as the chemical scientists of their time, the alchemists. They use these symbols as well for relating to both physical matter as well as philosophical growth. So there's a lot of history behind these. But as you can see, they're all very interesting looking. They're still used in astronomy as well. And the meaning behind them, anytime you see a circle, spirit. Anytime you see a cross, horizontal and vertical, that's matter. That's what they're talking about. Anytime you see a crescent, that's receptivity. And so a point, okay, obviously concentration of energy. So we have a combination of a number of those particular abbreviations put together so we get the symbology of what that planet is. And that's what those are right there.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Does Pluto still count, seeing they deemed it not a planet?
Some astrologers kind of dropped it off. I use it all the time. There's really, really good reason for it. And as well as on this particular slide, you see some other asteroids, which a lot of astrologers use and some astrologers don't. It just depends on what you're looking for and what the astrologer is doing. So even though they're not planets, they still have influences on us, and especially if they're in tight relations with other planets, they start influencing them even more. So answer to your question, Pluto is still very, very strong, and it still has influence in our charts.
Okay, I still count it.
Oh, good. Well, it makes him feel good, too, because, he's in the underworld, it gets kind of dark.
Although I do not count the 13th zodiac sign.
Well, right now I don't either. So.
Well, wouldn't that throw the whole chart? Wouldn't that throw the whole? Is that why there was such a huge hullabaloo about that 13th symbol when it came out and they dropped Pluto and all that? Because it would go from being an even 30 degrees for every sign to what I don't know, 13 would throw it into what, like 24 point something?
Yeah, it would create some issues there. In the past, there have been times when they used something like 14 signs for the zodiac. So it's not totally off the wall that people would even consider it, because it's happened before. But 12 works out so nice because it's an even number in dealing with 360 degrees.
Right, right.
And it works out well because you have 4 elements, and you have 3 modes of those elements, and that makes 12 as well, so that works real well. It fits nicely.
Right.
Well, that
And-
and when they threw in that 13th one, I'm sorry, when you're nearing 50 years old and you've been this sign your entire life, all of a sudden they're throwing you somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a good story for you when that happened. I have a Leo client, and she called me up that same day, Kim. And she goes, I'm a Leo, and they've changed it. They're taking away my roar. And I said, don't worry, it's okay, you're still a Leo.
It could have been worse, Isaac. It could have been a Cancer, and they could have told you they stole their crafts. It can always get worse.
Thank you for putting that in perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's, and I guess, going back, I'm gonna put up the deal of the empty wheel, because the next thing you do when you have this wheel, and like you said, it divides it. You were talking about it divides into the 4 elements. That's why there's a water sign, earth sign, fire sign, and air signs. That it all fits very nicely into that. But how do you feel that?
How do we feel that? That's based off when you're born. So it's just besides your birth date and where, we need to know when, and that when determines where those planets are placed on your chart. Are they this way or are they this way? Because on the eastern horizon, which is on the left-hand side middle of your chart, that's the eastern horizon of when you were born, and that's that particular section of the sky, and potentially you might have a planet there as well, and that's your ascendant. And that's what sets your whole chart as being yours.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put up that next slide that
Okay.
actually has the signs on there, the zodiac signs on there. It also has the planets and the symbols on there too.
Yeah, that one shows for each one of those signs, there's a particular planet that's associated with that area, that sign, and it has power there. It rules it, is what it's called. So I have a ruler for Aries, and that's Mars. And this is for everybody. That's how it works. And Venus is in Taurus, and Gemini has Mercury and such. And if those planets actually happen to end up in those placements in your chart, they have greater power and influence. And in this case, Kim's has a couple of those, which is very, very interesting. Now, on the contrary, if you have the planet in its opposite sign, so if you look at Aries, we see Mars there. It looks like a circle with the spear point at the top. If it happens to be in the opposite in Libra, that's not as good. It's not as powerful there, and we change the meaning a little bit because of that, because it's not in its best form there. That's like a horse. Some horses can run in the mud and some can't. It's still the same horse, but it's not in the right environment.
Right. You'll have more trouble dealing with those situations.
Right. It's just not as clear cut. It's not as smooth. It just doesn't work as well. Because in this particular example, Mars in Aries can be very, very forceful and aggressive and impulsive. In Libra, it's no longer just the one individual. It's dealing with couples and business orientation and things like that. That's not a good place for Mars. It's too rambunctious. So it ends up usually causing issues in terms of dealing with other people.
Would you say Mars has a very childlike energy?
The first house, the house of Aries, is often called the child, because it's all them. It's me, 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 what am I doing? What do I feel? And they're so preoccupied with themselves they can forget everybody else.
With Kim's chart, on her chart, does she show to have that in her first house?
In her first house, no, she has the North Node, but she has Saturn in Aries, which gives her a little bit of awareness of self being very, very strong. And also with these planets, you can also have these planets in different placements where that are called exaltation and falls, which basically being in good places and not so good places. So those are part of the consideration as well. If we go to the next slide, we actually can see some of these angular aspects. They have names like conjunction, semi-sextile, sextile, square, trine. Those are what gives us those lines in the middle of the chart. You take a look at those, Eric. It looks like Star Wars is going on. All these things going back and forth.
Yeah, it's like a spirograph.
Right. And a lot of clients come up to me, well, is that bad? Is that good? And I say, that's what makes you. That's what makes you as a true individual. And, the lines that represent aspects that are very, very beneficial or easier for us to deal with are usually colored green or blue on most astrology charts. And those are the trines and sextiles. Those are energies where the planets are actually working together. They're not doing this. They're holding hands or whatever, but they're working together. The ones that are in red are usually indications of oppositions, squares, and those are where the planets are not working together. They're actually doing tug of war, or they're coming at each other like a T-bone.
There's a lot of red on there.
Yeah, there is a lot of red on yours.
And those show up in red, and then conjunctions is where they line up directly one on top of the other, so they combine influence and they become like supercharged, like putting a magnifying glass on both of them, and they just kind of influence each other a lot more. So the clients come up to me and they go, oh, I have all these red lines on my chart. Oh, what am I going to do? I say, no, that's actually not a bad thing at all in the long run, because without those kind of challenges that show up in your chart that you're going throughout your life, if you don't have those, you get a little bit of a milquetoast type person. They don't have much behind them. They don't have any challenges to push against, like rowing a canoe. Without that push, you can't get anywhere. That gives you the friction, the challenges, the hurdles that you have to go through to become something bigger and better than you are.
So, and I'm not trying to oversimplify this, I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around this. The planets, i.e. the houses, are almost personality traits and tendencies?
They're influences of that sort, yes. And the thing is, we have a lot of them there, and you're going to have to go, well, in this conglomeration, who's more powerful than the other one, and who's kind of driving the ship here?
Gotcha.
And sometimes it'll flip back and forth depending on what kind of thing is being looked at. Is it emotional or is it logical?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like this big stew, and everybody's in there, and everybody has a little bit different flavor now. Which one's going to dominate?
And at different times, as you move through your chart, at different times, different influences will rule that house and your actions to a certain degree.
As we go through our lives, we still have the planets up above, and they're rolling across the sky, and they're going over your natal chart, is what it's called. And they're basically, those transits are creating energies and influences that you're getting as well. Definitely, yes, Eric. So your different times of your life, both that and progressed as the planets go through the different cycle around the sun, they're going to create opportunities and challenges for you to go through. So like every 7 years, you're going to have to deal with your Saturn squaring you, or opposition, or actually a Saturn return, and you're having to go through a major hurdle of maturation of growth cycles.
And please correct me if I'm wrong with this. You can't tell when you're going to die by looking at your chart, can you?
Not really.
That's
I can tell you things that you probably should watch out for health-wise. But, you know, actually when you're going to die, you know, some astrologers kind of dabble in that. I don't think it's worth looking into.
The reason I ask is if somebody was coming to this with fresh eyes and they had never been exposed to it before, when you start talking about your chart starts at a particular time on your birth and that's when it starts, saying that there's a specific starting point almost always would mean that there's a specific ending point. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that that's not quite how it works.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
No.
Right. Well,
Now,
people get confused with that sometimes, and I just wanted to clear that up.
well, good. Because, yeah, definitely it's not that at all.
I don't
Now,
know
there
why
could be
women-
transits that are saying, you better watch out, you know, watch your health, or watch out for accidents, or don't go too fast on the freeway. But,
Right. No, and
But you're
no
always
texting and driving. That's all. That's right out. And I'm sure they thought of that 4,000 years ago, right?
not quite, you know. Maybe your chariot, I don't know.
You know, never can tell. Okay.
What kind of morbid person would want to know when they're going to die anyway?
Well, I'm just, like I said, just some people are coming in new to this, and if they see a starting point, they're going to want to know an ending point.
No, I don't want to know.
And this is more like a road map, right?
It's more like a map, yeah.
Does it
Where do you want to take it? Because you could have similar type influences to different people, and they totally approach it differently. You still have free will, but this is going to definitely have an influence on you.
Right.
Dang, that free will again.
Yeah, there it goes again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where are we
And
going
if we
to
look
next?
at that next slide, it gives us those symbols for those signs, just so you have a reference there.
It's up there.
It's up there. You got Aries, the ram, Taurus, the bull. And as you can see there, you know, the glyphs or the symbols there have a little bit to do with the, you know, what the particular animal or human or whatever is up there.
And these
Leo
are-
the lion, sometimes people ask me about that one. That's representative of the spine on a human, the Kundalini force, and Leo is of that nature, and you have that circle of the sun there. Virgo, the Virgin, that symbol. Some people say it's the cloak of the Virgin in the field, you know, swirling the cloak. That one's kind of weak, I thought, but that's the way it is.
I always thought that Pisces was the sideways 69 and Cancer was the H.
Nope.
Shows what
Pisces is the fish. One fish going this way and one fish going this way,
and
with
these,
the cord between them.
and these are the Greek versions of these.
More Greek than anything, yes.
Okay.
And when the Romans took over the Greeks, you know, they basically, you know, thought it was a, you know, good deal, and they absorbed a lot of these ideas and then changed some of the gods and goddesses to their own names. A lot of the attributations of those gods and goddesses are still the same, even though it might have a different name.
Right. Right.
So you have Poseidon and you have Neptune, and you have Aries and you have Mars, and so on.
Right. The difference.
Let's go on to the next one. This is the one that's really, really important, I think, and we wanted to talk about, and it's about the houses.
Okay. It's up there.
Excellent. Now, like I was talking to you about this, Eric, this gives us an idea what's going on to that individual based on the time that they were born, what ends up being on that first house cusp or that first house line between the 1st and the 12th. That's called the ascendant. That's important, because that's the energy of where the sun, at that point in time, the horizon on the east for that person. So that's what they're going to be expressing throughout their life. On the opposite, on the west, between the sixth and the seventh house, that edge there, that's the descendant. That's where they need to go. That's where they need to travel to. So this is part of your roadmap.
Gotcha. And each
So,
and each house as you
so
go
you
through,
want. Go ahead.
each house as you go through is a change. It's a change in the heavens that will directly affect how you act and or react.
It's going to how it's that. The way I like to tell everybody about it, you think of the planet as a force. It's a different force. The sign is how it's focused, and your house is where it's focused on you.
Okay.
So with this, I can say, oh, you have Mars in the sixth house, which Kim does. So that energy of Mars, which is aggressive, initiatory, masculine, forceful, full of initiative, it's in the sign of Scorpio, which is of intensity of emotion. So we put those two together. We got that force through that focus, and where is it hitting? It's hitting her in the sixth house, which is service and health, which means she has a lot of power in terms of dealing with how she exercises, how she deals with her nervous energy, how she deals with organizing things around her. So it becomes very, very personal as to how that power is hitting you.
Yeah.
And with that, with Mars there, you have to be careful that, you're getting enough exercise and you're not internalizing a lot of anger.
Okay.
On the other side, when you look at, she has Moon in the third house, and the Moon, receptivity, emotional receptivity, intuition, and such. It's in the sign of Cancer, so it's wanting to mother and help bring in and comfort others. And it ends up being in the third house, which is communication. So that's a driving force of her emotional energy wanting to express itself and communicate and help other people. That ends up being a very, very strong influence on her chart. And as it turns out, you're on the radio, you're on the internet TV. That's part of that energy, that communications.
And I don't ever shut up, so.
Well, I would say with that Moon there that you need to express your emotions all the time.
Oh,
and I don't think you can hold back.
She really does.
That is, yeah, it's part of your nature. You have to express what you're feeling. That's that push that you were born with. But that's also a gift, and that's something, Eric, I wanted to bring up, that no matter where your planets are, there's subjectively, there's good and there's bad to it. But those are our viewpoints. It's just power and how we're working with it.
It's kind of like tarot when you can, if you read and invert it.
That's true.
I mean, there's always going to be good and bad.
Yeah, there's always good and bad of how you dealing with that energy. So that Moon there, makes you very, very sensitive. So you can be too sensitive, but you could be sensitive enough that you become a very, very strong empath. You're around other people and you immediately know what they're feeling and you can help them out. So it's the same energy. It's just how you're working with it, two sides of it.
Yeah, the whole physical empath thing gets ugly quick.
It can.
Yeah, I'm sure it gets tiring at times because you pick up on everything.
Yeah, I get more of their aches and pains than I do their mental. It's not a happy place sometimes.
Unfortunately, it's not. And, that relates to some other things. And you have Jupiter, which is a big, big planet, and it ends up being in the fourth house, the house of the home. And this Jupiter is in Cancer as well, so that's always going to bring a lot of energy to you, Kim, that you want to have a large kitchen, a large house, plenty of room, a lot of food in the cupboard. You want to be peaceful, calm, and happy there because that's where you feel the best and in control of things as in your home. That is actually an awesome place for Jupiter to be. But it will try to keep you in your home versus going other places, though. It likes to hold you there.
Yeah. Well, everything keeps winding up in Cancer, which is really weird.
No, not really. Not when you look at my chart.
I say that
So
because my parents, my daughter, and my husband are all Cancer.
Well, that's where you're going to feel the best and feel comfortable is with that kind of energy, because you can relate to all that emotional intensity that they have because you can understand it. Sometimes you may not like it, but you can understand it. Because you have a lot of emotional intensity yourself. We haven't got to these other ones, but you have a grand trine in water, which means you have a situation where you have three different planets they're each trining each other, so it makes this gigantic triangle there. If you look on your chart, it's in blue or green, whatever. Not
Blue, I think.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
It's got its point down that hits that Jupiter.
Okay.
That's a very, it's not extremely unusual, but it's not something that you see in every chart by any means as well. That's a grand trine. That gives you a huge amount of energy and understanding and working with emotional things, because you have these other planets, they're each in a water sign, and they're helping each other out. So it's expression of that, your Pisces, that's solar expression, your sun's there, your Jupiter is in Cancer, and you have Mars in Scorpio. So you end up being a very, very powerful, water-driven, empathic energy that needs to express itself in a very strong communicative fashion all the time.
See, I'm not just a big mouth. There's a reason for it.
Oh, you come by it natural. I'm not arguing. I've never argued that.
But that Mars in Scorpio, Kim, gives you a huge amount of energy that always needs to be focused, because if it's not focused, it can be a very destructive, reactive type nature. Which means if you get ticked off, you pounce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't do very often. I mean, I average every 12 years.
That's good, because when that happens, it sets off a lot of power, and that's not usually great to have. But what that Mars does, if you look over, it's on the far right hand side there. It's in that red. It looks like that circle with the spear again. It's directly opposite. It's on your descendant there. That's the driving force in your chart for your whole life, which is you maximizing your energy to get things done that you want to get done, and not procrastinate and just hold back.
Yep. Procrastination is my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, it's something that you're always dealing with, because you're coming from your ascendant is Taurus, and that Venus is there in Taurus, so she likes to sit back and say, let it grow, let it develop, it's going to come in its own time. I want to be comfortable, I want to be safe and secure, I don't want to move too quick. But that Mars is on that opposite side saying, if you want to get something done, you need to go out there and get it done now.
Yep.
And so that's the balance of your life, is is going through those cycles, what do you need to really jump up and go after, and what can you give some more time to and enjoy the growth and the development and have time to smell the roses too.
That makes a lot of sense. That's scary.
Yeah. Now that Venus in Taurus also, it's that little green symbol. It's on the left-hand side there. It looks like it's the feminine symbol in biology. It's a circle with the cross underneath it.
Yes.
She's right there. She's in her ruling sign, which is awesome. Again, we got Venus in her ruling sign, and we have Mars. Mars is the old ruler for Scorpio, and the exact opposite. So your chart is showing that you have this strong, strong ability on the feminine side as well as the more masculine type energy that you're working with as part of your spiritual development. And kind of a shorthand for that, you're having to learn how to balance your forces of energy.
Well, that explains this better, doesn't it?
And that Venus there says, I want things beautiful around me. You should be very aware that that is a strong green emerald color. That color might give you a lot of peace and calm wherever you're at. That planting in the garden will be a very strong therapeutic value for you because you'll be in the dirt, and that will release a lot of that strange karmic potential Saturn type influence, and that Saturn gives you sometimes a lot of depression type orientation. So you have to be aware of that.
I like to spend a lot of time playing in the dirt.
Good. That is the best thing you can do with that, because that will, especially if they're flowers and they bring forth and you can enjoy them and you just go, oh, I love nature. That's what you want. That's what that is.
And I've always been planting flowers.
And with that Mars on the other side, that is being part of life and having the vigor and the power and the sexual energy to enjoy life.
You
So-
have to enjoy life, otherwise there's
Why?
no life. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a major part of what's going on there, and that's driving force. Now we have that sun up there with Saturn, and the sun looks like a circle with a dot in it, and Saturn looks like an H. It's in the 12th house. So your sun is in Pisces, and Saturn has just moved over. It's in Aries. Now something interesting here, Kim, with that Saturn in Aries like that close to your sun, it's usually indicative of having a father or father figure when you were growing up that was very, very overpowering your energy in terms of discipline or just in ego force.
Actually, it was my mom.
Okay. Was your father around?
Until I was 15.
Yeah. A lot of times I've seen that in charts too, and the father's not around, that mother takes over that Saturn type position. Usually the mother shows up as the moon. But she was a very dominating force then.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crack the whip is what Saturn in Aries is.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly with her.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a very, very strong. Now, the thing to keep in mind, Kim, that's in your chart, so that's always part of what you're working with in the background. And it's not that you can run away from it. You just acknowledge it and say, I need to be aware of that I don't have to take that on. I just need to be aware that I need to always focus what I'm doing and not feel like I'm being pushed or aggressively disciplined to go to a particular direction or a particular form of action.
Actually, most of what I've done since the age of 17 is whatever I think she would want or expect. I've done completely the opposite.
Okay. And And with your chart, with that moon and that Jupiter down there, that means that your gut feeling, what you feel inside, is going to be the strongest indicative power within you to determine if it's something that you should do or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow that, you're going to be right 99 times out of 100. Because that is probably as on as anybody can have.
See, I told you I was always right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very strong intuitive force that you have, Kim. So I would definitely work with it. And in your generation, we have something interesting there. In the 5th house, we have Pluto and Uranus there, and they're conjunct. They're basically side by side, and they're very slow planets. They're out there a great distance. So the sign that they end up being in is not as important as what house they're in. In this case, it's the 5th house. The 5th house is an expression of what you want to show other people. It's the house of where Leo is. So those two there, you are an expressive energy of change and transformation. Another word for that is sometimes you're a rebel.
Oh yeah.
And you look at things and you say, no, this should not happen this way. We need to change it. Listen up and wake up, and let's do it this different way. That's what that energy does.
Yeah, I've been told that's called hard-headed.
Yeah, and it's directly across your chart. Take a look there. See, we got junks and we cross. It's sitting across there, so it really kicks off a lot of the things on Chiron, which is the healing wisdom aspect of that particular asteroid, which says to me that you are a healer, but you are a very different kind of healer. You can, as empathic as you are, you can be around people, and your electrical energy can rejuvenate a lot of people's psyches and actually get them to feeling better and shifting their viewpoint of dealing with other people.
I can see that. And it's by your being around you and your force of persuasion in terms of the social context. So being around groups of people, you can really help energize them and help motivate them to change. And is it just change for change's sake? No, it's change because you think it needs to be done. It's a growth-oriented type thing. And you can actually see what's going on in terms of their health and where they need to be moving towards, and you can work with that. Yeah, I my big thing is I don't like depressed people. I have to make them smile.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you do that. That's, as you know, that's extremely important. One planet we haven't talked about is Mercury. And Mercury is the one that's the circle, but he has the crescent on top, and then he has the cross of manifestation beneath him. And Mercury is all about communication. And in your chart, Mercury is sitting there. It's in the 11th house, and it's in Pisces. So your communicative power is through Pisces, which is it's imagination, it's ideas, it's being able to see what's beyond the reality before us. It's being able to see beyond in terms of the past into the karmic type energy. It's being able to see into people's nightmares, dreams, hopes, fears, and wishes. And your Mercury's there, so you can communicate that, and it's in the 11th house, so you're around other people that need to hear that, and so you talk about that, and you feel more comfortable talking about that than a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So searching into the mysteries and then bringing that information back and helping share that is part of what you're supposed to do. But that Mercury, a lot of times in Pisces, is kind of shy and it's a little bit hesitant to jump out there. But when you feel comfortable, it jumps right out and starts talking about it.
When I feel comfortable, then my mouth doesn't shut up.
Okay.
I'm the first one to say I'm a big mouth. I know this.
That's okay.
Just so you know, Isaac, you've nailed it so far.
Okay. Up there also in the 7th house, which is over on the right-hand side, just above the middle there, it's Neptune, and it looks like a trident. It's in Scorpio. It's in the 7th house. And something that comes up with this one is, Kim, you are such a strong romantic, and anybody that you deal with on a strong personal level, they have to be part of what you feel is right and important to your life in terms of their faith, in terms of their orientation towards dealing with things. Empathically, they need to feel comfortable. You just don't hang around anybody. It's really, really important that any relationship you have means something on a very high spiritual level.
Pretty much, isn't it? And if it winds down, then they're gone.
Yeah. But, Eric, she's a very, very big romantic. You need to be aware of that and use it.
Well, I tried. I'm still breathing, so I must be doing something right.
Good sign. Good sign. Over on the far left, right underneath that Venus sign, right in the middle, we have this, it's called the North Node, and it's a symbol that looks like upside down U with two little circles at the end there. That's not actually a planet. That's actually a place in the sky where the moon crosses the ecliptic there. And it ends up being on your ascendant, Kim. And this is very unusual. You just don't usually see this. And what that does, it says when you were born, basically that was giving you a blessing that you were going to be able to express what you're supposed to express on this life. That you were going to be driven to do this, and you're going to be pushed towards it, and there was nothing that you were going to do to get out from underneath it. So it's basically saying you were giving a directive as soon as you were born of what you needed to do. My question to you is, do you feel that?
Most of the time.
Okay. I hope so. It's in Taurus, which means that you're manifesting things around you. You're actually making things real. Yet you're traveling towards this thing with this Mars in Scorpio, which you're dealing with these strong emotions. So you're seeing both sides of that strong energy of creation is what it amounts to. So making things happen and then dealing with it on the emotional side.
You keep looking at me. I don't know what to say.
I'm
He's
just,
got me.
He's nailed you. He's got you.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting one, and that's the one that's probably going to be through your head always. Am I accomplishing what I really need to, and am I really expressing the power of getting things done that I need to? Am I accomplishing that? And that's going to be pushing you on. Be careful with that Saturn in that 12th house, that if you start to feel depressed, you start digging in the dirt and you start planting something.
I can do that.
Yeah. And that Saturn next to your Sun also means you need to take care that you don't overwork yourself. That's the ability to do a lot of work, but it's it's usually the ability, and you do too much of it is what happens.
Yes, but idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Okay.
Stop grinning at me.
So that kind of in a brief type nutshell gives us an idea what sort of patterns, what sort of powers are being pushed onto your soul, and then you have to work with them.
And I wanted to make sure everybody got to see this graphic real quick because we didn't have a chance to talk about it very much. This also relates to tarot cards too, or at least the majors, correct?
That is correct. A lot of people don't realize that, but when, a lot of the later mystical traditions, magical Western traditions like the Golden Dawn and such, they attributed particular tarot cards to particular signs and planets. And so you can use that to help teach yourself astrology if you know tarot, or you should just be aware of it, that those are out there. They end up being a great meditative device as well.
What is the one in the fourth house for Cancer? What is that?
That is the chariot.
Ah.
And he drives the chariot not with reins, but with his mind. And on his shoulders are crescent moons, which is the receptivity of all that lunar energy. And through his emotions, he drives the chariot, which are the two sphinxes in opposite colors, to where he needs to go.
Talks about yin and yang, the duality of man, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it becomes a very, very interesting exercise to work with as well. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention.
Yeah, that's and like I said, people need to understand the big, huge time difference, because I think that confuses people sometimes, because I think wrongly sometimes people assume, and everybody knows what happens when you assume something. They assume because there are so many tarot readers and not so many astrologers anymore.
That's true.
That somehow or another tarot is older, wiser, blah, blah, blah. That's not necessarily the case. It's actually the complete opposite. And if it weren't for astrology, you'd have no tarot. Tarot would have been a card game that died out in France in the mid 1600s.
Right, and then the French kind of revitalized it, and it got caught up in the magical revolution and such, and so it kind of came back. But the reason there's more tarot readers, it's because there's pictures, Eric.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see the picture.
Yeah, and there's no math or algebra or geography geometry involved. So yeah. No, and I get that, and I know tarot started as a working man's divination, blah blah blah. That's why Lenormand is so much simpler than tarot, which compared to astrology is simple. And I get it. I get it.
Yeah, as long as you work with it. But something to keep in mind. A lot of people may not realize, but you can use astrology in a divinatory fashion. Basically, the time of the question becomes the birth time, and you do the chart accordingly. And I've done those for all sorts of people, from finding their car keys to finding lost tickets to finding out who stole something from my house and where did it go, those sort of things. An astrology chart will also give you that information.
Where was he when we had that ring missing for 3 years?
Yeah. Yeah, that was. I think that was a little more spiritual than.
He had a ring disappear, and we were sure my sister took it.
And I for years wrongly accused her of stealing it, and then I'll gladly come out and say that I was wrong.
And after digging through everything in the house and going through my jewelry box a billion times, after our third move, it showed up on top of my jewelry box.
On top of it?
Yes.
And now this is moving 3 times. This is 3 completely different moves.
Wow.
2 different states.
In 2 different states. So you're packing it up, moving, unpacking, and when you unpack everything. You don't just push it, or at least we do. And then She
Yeah.
come walking into that office that one day and said, "Look what I found." I'm like, "Aw." I
Oh.
was like, "Damn it! Now I gotta apologize to your sister."
Sometimes the universe does those kind of things, and it's so strange, but it's to get your attention. So,
That's all right. I got 3 other sisters. She'll get over it.
Yeah.
okay, good, good.
Well, Isaac, stick around because I got a question for you. But
Okay.
thank you so much for coming on tonight and enlightening Kim as to the meanings of her chart, because nobody's got her like this in a while. I'm
Okay, well, it's my pleasure. And they need to get up with me, Isaac at oasisdawn.com. Glad to help you out.
And watch him Thursday nights.
And Thursday nights you can catch him with
Thursday nights with Jordan. Jordan and I talk about all sorts of different things, and we have a great time with it. And it's love to have even more people show up.
Well, see, now I understand even more of what you two were talking about, because I've learned quite a bit tonight. So,
Excellent.
everybody, be sure and tune in. Monday will be a repeat.
Yes, because it's the Monday
Yeah,
for Easter.
after Easter. Yeah, so Monday will be a repeat on Just Saying, but tune in every night of the week. We have live shows every night of the week, except Saturdays. And Saturday, if you're in the Longview, Tyler, Gladewater area, be sure and come out to Metaluna Boutique and Stones for our meetup.
And if you're not real close and want to come out for the entire day, Gusher Days is this weekend
That's
too.
true.
And Highway 80 yard sales.
Yep. So
Wow.
while you're out and about, come out to the finest little metaphysical shop in East Texas.
The only metaphysical
It's
shop
the
in
finest.
East
Hey,
Texas.
hey, I'm trying to help you here. So, if you go out investigating this weekend, everybody, be careful, be safe, and write down what you're doing. And we'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Bye.